Hello, and welcome to Field Lab Earth, the podcast that's all about past and present advances in the fields of agronomic, crop, soil, and environmental sciences. Today, we'll be talking to Dr. Anuj Chiluwal. Soybeans are a crucial crop in the United States for a variety of uses, including for its use as a protein source in animal feed. However, in recent years, high-yield varieties have seen a steady decline in seed protein concentration. In this episode, Anuj joins me to discuss the sources of this decline and some potential strategies to combat it. I'm your host, Abby Morrison. Let's talk about science. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today we have Dr. Anuj Chiluwal with us today. Anuj is an assistant professor of agronomy at Kentucky State University. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree in agriculture from Tribhuvan University in Nepal, his Master's of Science degree in biotechnology from Fort Valley State University in Fort Valley, Georgia, and a PhD in agronomy from Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. He worked at the University of Kentucky, University of Florida, and Florida Sugar Cane League before joining his current position at Kentucky State University. Hi, Anuj. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you, Avi?
I'm doing well. I am very excited to talk to you today. So, we are going to be talking about soybean today and a decline in seed protein concentration and what we can kind of learn and or do about it. So to get us started, can you kind of walk through the importance of soybean in the context of this conversation, as well as kind of the problem that we're facing?
Yeah, thank you, Avi, for the invitation. Appreciate the opportunity. We all know, right? Soybean is a very important crop in the U.S. In fact, the U.S. is the second largest exporter of soybean in the world. Soybean meal is commonly used in most of the poultry and livestock farms here at U.S. and also all around the world. Why soybean meal is so popular? Because it contains a very high amount of protein and amino acid content, right? That's why soybean meal is widely used all around the world, including the US. Soybean meal is basically a byproduct after the oil extraction from the soybean seed. So, first of all, we extract oil from the soybean seed, and then the remaining byproduct is used to prepare soybean meal for the animal feed. So that soybean meal should contain at least 44% protein concentration to meet the high quality animal feed requirement to support normal growth and development of poultry and livestock. The standard is set by the U.S. National Oilseed Processor Association, and to achieve that 44% protein concentration level, the whole soybean or the harvested soybean seed should contain at least 34% seed protein concentration level. To some extent, it also depends on other seed component, mainly oil concentration. But looking at the current oil concentration level in the U.S. soybean seed, the whole soybean seed or the harvested soybean seed should contain at least 34% seed protein concentration to produce soybean meal with 44% protein concentration level. But currently produced soybean meal in some U.S. location is struggling to meet that high quality animal feed standards. Why? Because there is a constant decline in soybean seed protein concentration over the year here at US. Let me give you the status of soybean yield and seed protein concentration trend in the US. If you look at the trend of US soybean yield over the years, soybean yield is increasing. There is a continuous increase in yield over the last few decades. For example, soybean yield in the US was 2.2 ton per hectare back in 1986, and in 2024, the soybean yield was 3.4 ton per hectare. So basically, soybean yield has increased more than 50% during the period, mainly due to the development of high yielding varieties and improved crop cultivation and management practices. But during the same time, if you look at the seed protein concentration trend, the seed protein concentration trend is actually decreasing. For example, soybean seed protein concentration was around 36% back in 1986, and currently it is around 34%. So the seed protein concentration has declined almost by 2 percentage during the period. Due to this constant decline in seed protein concentration over the years, the seed protein concentration in currently grown modern high yielding cultivars is lower than the cultivars that we used to grow in the past. So, because of that decline in soybean seed protein concentration, currently produced soybean meal in some US location is struggling to meet that high quality animal feed standards, that is soybean meal with 44% protein concentration. And if this trend continues, if this trend of declining soybean seed protein concentration continues, it's going to be a problem in many other US locations. So that's why declining soybean seed protein concentration is one of the major concern for the US soybean industry. So this is the brief overview about the importance of soybean in the US, importance of seed protein concentration for the good quality animal meal, declining soybean seed protein concentration trend in the US, and why this is one of the concern for the US soybean industry. And so these are some of the motivation for writing this paper where I discusses about the declining soybean seed protein concentration trend in the US, main reason behind the decline, and its effect on soybean meal and animal feed quality, and some potential solution to address this issue.
Sure. So you mentioned that this is like happening in the US. Is it pretty exclusive to the US at this point, or do we not know?
So generally, like yield and quality, there is a trade-off between the yield and quality. So when yield is increased, it also affects negatively affects the quality. So the trend is, I believe it is across all over the world. But here in the US, we have like soybean quality reports every year. So every year we collect soybean seed samples from across the nation, and we have the data. We have that annual seed quality report and data every year. So from that data, we can see the trend. So I'm not sure in other soybean producing nations they have those kind of data, but I assume the trend is same across the world, especially if the when soybean yield is increasing, it also negatively affects the quality.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we're potentially a model for both what could be happening in the decline, but also maybe how we can fix it, which is great. So you've kind of touched a little bit on some of the issues with maybe some of these newer cultivars, but I'm curious kind of what we know about why the decline is happening, specifically in these new cultivars, but just in general, if there's other factors that are feeding into that. So I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, so your question is why soybean seed product concentration is declining in the modern high yielding soybean cultivars, right? So, yeah, for that, we need to understand the underlying mechanism for the increased yield but decreased soybean seed protein concentration in the US. So, the soybean yield is increasing, which means that the modern soybean varieties that farmers are growing now, they are producing a more number of seeds. They are producing bigger seeds. That's why soybean yield is increasing, right? At the same time, seed protein concentration is decreasing, which means that nitrogen assimilation rate in the seed is lower compared to the other seed components. Mainly, nitrogen is not able to keep up with the carbon assimilation rate, which basically indicate that there is a nitrogen limitation during the seed filling period in the currently grown high yielding soybean cultivars. and that is the main reason for declining soybean seed protein concentration. Recent studies, including our, we have showed that nitrogen limitation during the seed filling period is the main reason for the lower seed protein concentration in the modern high yielding soybean cultivar. Now, let me talk a little bit about why there is a nitrogen limitation in soybean. As we all know, right, soybean is a legume crop or a leguminous crop, right? Which means it has ability to capture or ability to use the freely available nitrogen that is present in the air through the process called biological nitrogen fixation. Most of the nitrogen needs in soybeans comes from biological nitrogen fixation, and the biological nitrogen fixation is the most efficient nitrogen source in soybean. That's the reason generally we don't apply a nitrogen fertilization in soybean field under the normal growing condition. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a nitrogen limitation in currently grown modern soybean cultivars, which means that only the biological nitrogen fixation is not enough to meet the high nitrogen demand during the seed filling period in the modern high yielding soybean cultivars. So the nitrogen limitation during the seed filling period is the main reason why seed protein concentration is decreasing. One of the possible contributors for the carbon assimilation at higher rate compared to nitrogen assimilation could be the higher carbon dioxide concentration in the current atmosphere compared to the past. That could be one of the reason for lower acid protein concentration in the current soybean cultivars, which is grown under a much higher carbon dioxide concentration compared to the cultivars in the past that were grown under the lower CO2 concentration. Actually, studies have also documented higher carbohydrates but lower seed protein concentration under the high CO2 environments, not only in soybean but also in several other crops. So, definitely, increased CO2 concentration in the atmosphere could be one of the contributors for the declining soybean seed protein concentration. On the related note, I also wanted to mention that CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is expected to continuously increase in the future, which means that soybean seed protein concentration will be affected even more in the future. That is also another reason we need to urgently address this declining soybean seed protein concentration issue. So, going back to your question, which is why soybean seed protein concentration is lower in these modern high yielding soybean cultivars, the short answer is nitrogen limitation during the seed filling period, and that is the main reason for the declining soybean seed protein concentration.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, obviously, if we have this nitrogen limitation going on in that period, we that's kind of what we need to pin down a solution for. So, in your paper, you found there were kind of 5 different areas where we can at least, maybe make some gains, some of which are practical, some of which are not maybe as practical to apply. So I was hoping you could go over those 5, and so I'll just list them off for our listeners as an overview. So one was just unlimited nitrogen fertilization supplies, late season nitrogen fertilization, adapting cultural practices, maybe some amendments or inoculants, and then farmer education. So could you walk us through all 5 of those, like what the solution is, and then, pros and cons?
So, for that, like as I mentioned earlier, now we know the problem for declining soybean seed protein concentration, right? Which is a nitrogen limitation during the seed filling period. So, to improve soybean seed protein concentration, we need to address that nitrogen limitation problem. So, the solution for that is to provide additional or supplemental nitrogen application. So, if we can provide additional nitrogen during the seed filling period, or if we can increase nitrogen availability to the plants during the seed filling periods, we can avoid that nitrogen limitation and improve soybean seed protein concentration. So that's why I discuss some of the potential ways to address that nitrogen limitation problem and some of their pros and cons in the paper. The first one is nitrogen fertilization, right? Unlimited nitrogen fertilization, early season nitrogen fertilization, and late season nitrogen fertilization, right? So to summarize all three different approaches, research studies, including our past and ongoing studies, we have showed that it is possible to increase soybean seed protein concentration with nitrogen fertilizer application. So now we know that if we can provide additional nitrogen during soybean growth, we can avoid that nitrogen limitation problem and consequently improve seed protein concentration. So this sounds like a very simple and straightforward solution to address the nitrogen limitation problem, right? But it's not that straightforward, and there are some challenges. The main challenges is that nitrogen fertilizer may not be a sustainable approach in soybean, as nitrogen fertilization can suppress biological nitrogen fixation. Why? Because if the plants get easy nitrogen from fertilizer sources, obviously it does not want to spend its energy on biological nitrogen fixation. So there is always a risk that nitrogen fertilization can suppress biological nitrogen fixation. So far, we know that if we apply nitrogen during early stage, or if you apply nitrogen, unlimited nitrogen during soybean growth, it suppresses a biological nitrogen fixation. So, the solution I discussed in the paper, early season nitrogen fertilization and unlimited nitrogen fertilization in soybean may not be a sustainable approach. And the third approach that I discussed in the paper was late season nitrogen fertilization, right? The late season nitrogen fertilization is the recently used practices in some research to address this declining soybean seed protein concentration issue. So we don't exactly know its effect on soybeans biological nitrogen fixation. One of the hypotheses regarding late season nitrogen fertilization is that soybean need a lot of nitrogen during its seed filling stage. So if we provide additional nitrogen during that stage, it would actually complement with biological nitrogen fixation to meet that high nitrogen demand during this stage, and it may not necessarily substitute biological nitrogen fixation. So that's a hypothesis, but definitely we need to test that hypothesis before recommending these practices in farmers field, right? So for that as well, we are doing some experiments to quantify the effect of late season nitrogen fertilization on biological nitrogen fixation. The ultimate goal is to provide additional nitrogen without negatively affecting if soybeans biological nitrogen fixing ability. Uh, so, so these are some of the pros and cons about that nitrogen fertilization methods to address the declining soybean seed protein concentration. Similarly, another approach that I discussed on the paper was to develop soybean with improved biological nitrogen fixing ability, right? So when you talk about improving soybeans biological nitrogen fixing ability, the root and root nodules, they are very important, and they play a very critical role in biological nitrogen fixation. But in most of the cases, roots get very less attention compared to the above ground plant component, which may also have been the case in the soybean breeding program. So another approach I see to develop soybean varieties with improved root structure and improved root architecture to see if it can improve soybeans biological nitrogen fixing ability. That would definitely be a more sustainable approach to address the issue in comparison to nitrogen fertilization, right? Similarly, another approach I discussed in the paper is to see if you can identify improved crop cultivation and management practices which can improve nitrogen availability and consequently help improve soybean seed protein concentration, right? We know that cultural practices can affect soybean seed composition, such as its protein concentration and oil concentration. So, if we can identify cultural practices which can improve nitrogen availability into the plants, that would definitely be a more sustainable approach than nitrogen fertilization to improve soybean seed protein concentration, right? So for that as well, we are conducting some studies. We are testing some of those potential cultural practices. For example, planting dates. We are testing different planting dates to see its effect on soybean seed composition, mainly protein concentration and oil concentration. Similarly, in the past, we have also tested supplemental bacterial inoculant application during crop growth. We added more nitrogen fixing bacteria into the soil during the crop growth. And currently, also, we are testing some soil amendment such as biochar to see if it can improve biological nitrogen fixation and consequently seed protein concentration. So far, we have seen some promising results, but the results are not always consistent to use any of these methods to accurately increase soybean seed protein concentration, which is one of the challenges using this approach. But I believe other researchers are also working along those lines. The goal is to identify improved crop cultivation practices which can increase seed protein concentration, which is definitely be a more sustainable approach to address this issue compared to nitrogen fertilization, right? So another approach I discussed in the paper was farmers education, right? The reason I discuss that approach could be helpful to address the declining soybean seed protein concentration in the US is that most of the US soybean farmers are not aware of this declining soybean seed protein concentration. So there was a recent studies which did a survey across 15 US soybean producing states, and they found that more than 70% soybean farmers did not know about the declining soybean seed protein concentration trend in the US, and only less than 15% farmer actually knew the protein and oil concentration level in their soybean seed. So that is the reason if we disseminate this important information to the farmers, that would actually help improve soybean seed protein concentration. So yeah, so these are I think some of the approaches I discussed in that paper, and some of its pros and cons.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the show. Interested in learning more? Anusha's paper, United States Soybean Seed Protein Concentrations, Current Status, Challenges, and Some Potential Crop Management Solutions, published in Agronomy Journal, is always freely available. If you are a certified crop advisor or certified professional soil scientist, you can take the quiz for continuing education units for this episode, which can be found in our show notes or on certifiedcropadvisor.org. Thank you for being our sponsor. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, what I love about this paper is that, well, most review papers, is that there's just so many angles that you're really tackling this problem from of, how can we work on multiple fronts to address this issue and make sure that we're not seeing that ongoing decline. But what I also enjoyed about this paper is that it feels like there's a lot of room for future research. Certainly, you've talked about, different projects that you and your team are working on. But yeah, just, continuing to find new fronts to fight this decline on. So, that could be whether that's plant breeding or, different aspects of the soil nutrient management moving forward, overcoming some of those potential cons that you mentioned that are currently restricting some of these solutions. So I would love to know just more about the future research, whether that's your team or other areas you think could be explored to help fight this decline.
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, some of the potential solution that can be used to improve soybean seed protein concentration, right? So to talk about some future research that can help improve those methods to effectively and sustainably improve soybean seed protein concentration. So one of the approach I discussed was late season nitrogen fertilization, right? So we already know early season and unlimited nitrogen application is not sustainable in soybean. So regarding this late season nitrogen fertilization, now we know that late season nitrogen fertilization works. So if we can provide additional nitrogen during this seed filling phase, we can increase soybean acid protein concentration. But we don't exactly know the optimal or ideal nitrogen fertilization dose. Why? Because so far all the previous studies, including ours, we have used very high dose of nitrogen fertilization, which is actually an obvious research practice because first of all we want to know if the treatment really works or not, right? So that's why at the beginning we try to use extreme treatment levels. For example, in this case, high nitrogen fertilizer dose. So from those studies, now we know that late season nitrogen fertilization works. So if we provide additional nitrogen during its seed filling phase, we can improve soybean seed protein concentration. But we don't exactly know about the ideal or optimal nitrogen fertilization dose. So the next step is to identify that optimal dose of supplemental nitrogen application, right? So for that as well, we are conducting multiple field experiments using different maturity group soybean cultivars and testing a different dose of late season nitrogen fertilization. The goal is to identify that optimal dose of nitrogen fertilization, which can effectively improve soybean seed protein concentration. Similarly, we also need to identify the optimal time of supplemental nitrogen application because it is not feasible or it is not practical to apply a multiple dose of nitrogen fertilization in the farmer's field, right? Especially we are talking about late season nitrogen fertilization, which needs to be applied when the crops are already growing in the field, right? So to identify that optimal nitrogen fertilization time, we are also testing nitrogen fertilization during different soybean seed filling stages. The goal is to identify that one particular growth stage in soybean, which can be targeted with supplemental nitrogen fertilization to effectively improve soybean seed protein concentration. So, optimizing late season nitrogen fertilization dose and timing with future resource can improve the nitrogen fertilization methods to effectively improve soybean seed protein concentration. And let me talk about another approach that I discussed, which is developing soybeans with improved biological nitrogen fixing ability, right? So, to achieve higher soybean seed protein concentration with this approach, soybean seed breeding program in the US should also focus on seed protein concentration along with soybean yield. For example, integrating high protein soybean lines in the breeding program. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier, roots play a very important role for biological nitrogen fixation. So, if soybean breeding program focuses on developing varieties with improved root structure and architecture that could be helpful to improve soybeans biological nitrogen fixation and consequently help improve higher seed protein concentration, right? Similarly, another approach that I discussed was identifying improved crop cultivation and management practices and that can improve nitrogen availability during the seed filling stage in soybean, right? We know that cultural practices can affect seed composition, but we don't exactly know which cultural practices can be used to improve seed protein concentration. So, to use this method effectively to improve soybean seed protein concentration, future research should focus on identifying those practices which can increase nitrogen availability into the plants to improve soybean seed protein concentration. So these are some of the future research I see that um, can improve those methods to effectively and sustainably improve soybean seed protein concentration. In summary, for the short term and long term solution to address the declining seed protein concentration trend, right now, late season nitrogen fertilization has emerged as an alternative to improve soybean seed protein concentration. However, it should be used cautiously as a short-term alternatives until we find more efficient and more sustainable approach. Improving soybeans biological nitrogen fixing ability with breeding, biotechnology, and improved cropping system and crop management practices should be the ultimate long-term goal.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a wealth of opportunities as I expected. So thank you for kind of leading the charge with your team to get this all figured out. I have 3 questions left for you. So the first one is if listeners would like to learn more about any of the things we talked about today, obviously there is your paper, but where else can they go?
So, besides this paper, to learn more about this matter, there are some studies which compared soybean seed protein concentration between the modern and traditional soybean cultivars. Similarly, there are also some studies that have tested some of the approaches that I discussed earlier to see if it can improve soybean seed protein concentration. So, I suggest going through those papers to learn more about it. Similarly, I also published an extension fact sheet where I discuss the issue of declining soybean seed protein concentration and some potential solution. That fact sheet can be found on Kentucky State University's extension website. And similarly, to learn more about the declining soybean seed protein concentration trend in the US, there is a team at University of Minnesota. They publish annual soybean quality reports every year in collaboration with United Soybean Board and other soybean organization in the US. They collect thousands of soybean samples across the nation, analyze and publish soybean yield, seed protein, and oil concentration in each soybean producing states and average across the nation. So, if you search US soybean seed quality report on the internet, you should be able to find their website and all the annual soybean quality reports. I think it is a very useful resources to learn more about this declining soybean seed protein concentration trend in the US.
Awesome. Yeah, we will include as many links as we can to those resources in our show notes. So be sure to check that out, listeners, if you'd like to learn more. Second question, if people then want to kind of take the next step to get involved with this issue, whether that is as a farmer or a researcher or a consumer, whatever, how can they do that?
So, definitely for the researcher, as I discussed earlier, right? So there are like a lot of ways to improve soybean seed protein concentration, and there are a lot of research need to be done to identify the sustainable approach to improve soybean seed protein concentration. So, researchers can work along those lines to help improve soybean seed protein concentration. Another way I see people, especially listeners, to get involved and actually be helpful to disseminate this information to the US soybean farmers and other stakeholders. Because, as I mentioned earlier, right, most of the US soybean farmers, they are not aware of this issue. They are not aware of this declining soybean seed protein concentration. So, if anyone can help disseminate this important information to the soybean farmers and other stakeholders, that would definitely be helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice for anyone interested. Last question for you. What is one fun fact that listeners wouldn't know about you if all they had was your research?
One of the facts about me that most of the listener may not know is that I am a huge sports fan, and I love watching sports. I mean, all kind of sports such as soccer, basketball, cricket, tennis, Formula One. So whenever I get some free time, I'm usually in front of TV watching some live games or highlights. So I'm not sure if it is a fun fact, but yeah, it is one of the facts about me that most listeners may not know.
That's awesome. I think it's a very fun fact.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
yeah,
I'm going to resist asking you about all your favorite teams and stuff because I'm sure that will rabbit trails.
yeah.
Uh, but this has been a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate you taking the time, laying out and synthesizing all this information about this obviously very important issue. So, thank you so much for your time and for all that you're doing to advance the research.
Yeah, thank you, Evie, for the opportunity. It was very nice talking with you.
Thank you for listening to Field Lab Earth. More information can be found in the description below. Thank you.